Welcome to the Greater Than Business podcast, where it's all about creating an amazingly successful business without sacrificing your quality of life, because life should be greater than business. And now, here is your host, Courtney Bedore.
This is episode 23 of the Greater Than Business podcast, and today we are going to be talking all about the importance of batching your content. Now, this is one of those things that if you run an online business, you're going to hear people talk over and over and over again about content being the key thing that will drive your business forward. And that is completely true. I completely agree with that statement. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you want to get your name out there, you have to be producing content, and you have to be doing it consistently, regularly, on a schedule. And if you're going to be doing things like that, then you have to batch your content. Now, if you're new to the world of batching, I want to explain just kind of quickly what exactly it is. Basically, batching is setting aside one day a week or one day a month, or I guess one incredibly long day a year, and doing all of your content in a massive production. So basically, for a podcast, you would have one day a week or one day a month where you would sit down, and your sole job that day is just to record. Get as many episodes done as you can so that you get as far ahead as you can. So I know there are some people in the podcasting world and even in the blogging world that batch their content like champs. Like, I've been on podcasts before that have recorded in September, and I've been notified that they won't actually be published until March. So look at how planned people can be in advance by batching out your content. Now, this is something that I have been trying to get better at, and that is why I wanted to have this discussion today about batching, because I fell off the batching wagon. So, no word of a lie, I am recording this episode the day before it is scheduled to publish, because I have had a whole lot of things happen in my life over the last few weeks. And unfortunately, batching my content kind of fell to the wayside. And for me, batching my podcast, I need to have nobody at home with me so that this microphone doesn't pick up all of the random little house noises and children noises and husband noises that happen. And it's bad enough that you guys already hear the dog noises that happen. But batching for me is something that I like to do when nobody else is home. And if you have been following me on Instagram, you will know that my last couple weeks have been a little bit of a shit show. I'm not gonna lie. So firstly, what happened was October 29th, my husband was driving home from a hockey practice, and he ended up hitting a deer with our vehicle. And everyone was perfectly fine other than the deer and my car. But human-wise, everyone in the vehicle was perfectly fine. No bumps, no bruises, no nothing. But that poor little deer that jumped out at the last second, he did get up and wander away, but we're not entirely sure if he wandered very far. But because of that, I have been running around trying to find a new car. I've also been dealing with insurance companies, trying to get the car written off or not written off or fixed or whatever they were going to decide to do. So my days have been spent doing crazy phone calls and shopping around hypothetically for vehicles, and actually finding a vehicle that I loved and then wanting to buy the vehicle, and just basically it's been crazy trying to deal with that. Then on top of it, my son, who was also in the car at the time of the car accident, he is a goalie for a AAA hockey team. And what happened was he ended up getting run over by a player in the final minute of a game. And I'm not going to let the mama bear come out here, but he was injured pretty bad with a concussion. And because of that, I've also had to still be going to all of my son's hockey games. And I've also still had to, or basically not still, but I've had to take him to various doctor's appointments and rehabilitation appointments and wellness checks to make sure that his head is still functioning. His concussion by no means was severe at all. Like, we are totally thankful for that, but it's still the same protocol that you have to go through, whether it be a minor concussion or a major concussion. And thankfully, they have all these steps in place. But when you're trying to run a business from home and you now have a child home with you who is incredibly active and can't do anything during the day, he was incredibly frustrated. We are still not in the clear from the concussion. We are going on a full week now of him not allowed to do anything. And they are projecting that he should be better within the week, but it's just one of those things where life happened and my business kind of was not a priority at the time. I was still doing things for my clients and I was still making sure that their businesses were running, but things that appeared to be less important were shoved to the side. And that, unfortunately, was my content. And the reason why I was able to shove it aside is because I did have quite a few episodes batched and ready to go. The only problem is that I had them batched and ready to go, and I kind of forgot when I was batched up until Saturday night, when I realized, oh, wait a second, I have a podcast scheduled to go out on Tuesday morning, and I don't have it recorded yet. So I decided to throw that topic that I had scheduled out the window and record this one for you, because this is real life. This is the whole purpose of my podcast, is showing you that sometimes life has to be bigger and better than your business. And sometimes life happens and your business needs to be able to be put on hold. So even though the things that happened to my family over the last couple weeks have been minor in the grand scheme of things, they were still annoyances that happened and things that took me out of my regular routine and didn't allow me to do things the way that I like them to be done. So that kind of triggered this episode for me, where I started thinking about how important it is to batch your content. Because if I didn't have those first few those first few podcasts set up, then I wouldn't have had a podcast going out the last couple weeks. Thankfully, I had to get all of my content set up and ready to go for other reasons. So I was batched. I think I had about 8 or 9 episodes batched and planned and ready to go. And then I recorded them all. And I had a good buffer built there. And then it just kind of, I started pushing it off. And then, of course, life happened. And when life happened, that is what I was not prepared for. But thankfully, I had a good couple of weeks recorded. And now that I'm on my it's already been published, but my very last episode that I had batched was published. Then I realized, I've got to get back in front of the microphone. And I have to get back into the batching, because who knows, next week, another curveball could get thrown in my life and I will be stuck again. So I just wanted to kind of share this personal story with you so that you will realize how and why it can be incredibly important to batch your content. And obviously you have to, what I basically do is I will batch my content knowing that if something was to arise where I basically wanted to switch something up and throw in a different episode, I could still do that. I don't necessarily send them off to my editor, but I do get them recorded so that they are out there and done, so that if I'm ready for it to go out, then I can do it. And then if I need to edit, generally the only thing that I edit in my podcast would be the episode. So at the beginning, when I always say that this is episode blank, that would be the one part where I may have to re-record and then send that off to my editor so he can fix it for me if I was to jumble up the order of my shows and the way how I have them planned out. So the only reason that would kind of come into play would be if something comes that is very fresh and relevant and I want it to get out there to the people faster than my general plan. So if I'm batched like 8 weeks in advance, which would be totally ideal for me right now, but I'm not. But if I was to be batched out 8 weeks in advance and then something happened in the world that I really wanted to talk about, so I can't think of anything that would really throw me off too much, but let's say that I do build a lot of my business off of Infusionsoft. And if Infusionsoft came out with a huge update and I really wanted to talk about that update, then that might be something where I would switch it so that I could get that out there when it's really, really relevant right after the switch, versus saving that and having it go out 8 weeks later after the switch had happened. So that would be something where I would change it up. But other than that, pretty much all of my topics that I speak on are generally not very time sensitive. Like there's nothing that, obviously the online world changes like crazy and it changes super fast. But most of the topics that I talk about are all kind of how you can prepare your business to deal with that and prep your life. And those type of tactics and things just don't change on a whim. So it's not so hard for me to batch out content, but the biggest thing that I noticed over the last couple weeks is by not prioritizing my batching, I am now in a crunch moment here. So I have to record this episode super early and I have to send it off to my wonderful editor who is probably listening to this and hating me so much right now. But Russell, I love you for being able to help me with this and get this episode turned around and published with record speed. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I am truly sorry. I will not do this to you again. But out of this whole chaos has come a really good lesson that batching is key. Batching your content will allow your business to survive any curveballs that life will throw at you. And even though I haven't been the most present online over the last couple weeks, I still have been able to run a business. I've still been getting sales. I've still been helping people. I've still been working with my clients, and I haven't had to worry about content, which is great. So if you take anything away from this episode today, I highly suggest that you sit down, look at your calendar, and think about how you could batch your content and what the best method would be to batch your content. So for me, I have, as I've mentioned before, several key topics that I like to speak on. And I've considered myself not necessarily the best expert out there on these topics, but they are within my realm of expertise. So I have, I think it's jumped up to 34 different topics now, that at any moment I can talk on any of these topics and I can share with you guys all of my thoughts, my insights, and everything based on those 34 different topics. And then each of those topics are all things that I love to speak about and that I'm comfortable batching content around. So I can sit down in any given day, plan out my schedule and say, okay, on Tuesday, I'm going to record 9 episodes of my podcast. And then on the following Tuesday, I'll have that time blocked out where then I can set up all of my podcasts. And that means get them. Obviously, they're already sent over to my editor. He would be editing them. And then when they come back from him, I can get them transcribed. And then I set up the webpage for the show notes. And I do all of that other little stuff. But I set aside that one day a week where I deal with all of my podcast content. So obviously, I will record one week and then I will write the show notes the next week. And then the following week, I will either record more episodes or I will do something like social media posts and batching those out. So I try to batch after I've batched the main content, then I batch all of my social media on top of it. And I batch all of my show notes on top of that. And I just basically try to keep one day a week is always set aside for my podcast content. Now, unfortunately, if I don't have anything happening on those days that I really need to do for my podcast and I can't record, then that is where I fall into this wonderful mess that I have found myself in now. So I don't want you to get into that, but I want you to get into a good habit of setting aside one day a week or one day a month, depending on your frequency and your schedule and how far in advance you want to batch. And sit down, plan out that day, and really try to stick to it. And kind of make it a non-negotiable in your business. And also, if you're working with clients the same way that I am, let them know that Tuesday's your batch day. So if you can get all of their main stuff done on Tuesdays, then you can focus on or basically get it done early in the morning on Tuesdays. And then you can focus on your batch and then follow up with them later after you've done everything that you want to do for your batching, and then come back to them. But just kind of let them know that there's kind of a do not disturb period in the middle of the day where you will be inaccessible. Now, the other thing that I want to kind of talk about too is making sure that when you do set aside a batch day, that you really are present with batching and you make sure that nothing is going to disturb you. Make sure that you have all notifications turned off. Make sure that your phone ringer's turned off. Make sure that you're not expecting any random deliveries that may set off your dog, all of those fun things so that you can just sit down and really, really focus on batching out your content. And you will thank me later for this. I 100% guarantee it. So in the show notes for this week, I'm not going to have it ready by the time that this goes live, but shortly after, I am going to have some content batching tips. I'm going to put them out on a sheet for you, and you guys will be able to go through it and basically get all of these little tips and tricks that I've talked about briefly in this episode. And I really want you to take a peek at them and see if you follow them. And if you follow them and you really like it, let me know. So my email, as always, is flow@flowautomationinc.com. That's where you can reach me. It does actually go to my inbox. You will actually get a response from me. And I love having conversations with you guys there. So if you want to get in touch, that is how to do it. If you want to check out the show notes for this episode, please go to greaterthanbusiness.com/023, where you will get all of the show notes and everything that you need to know related to this episode. You can also check out greaterthanbusiness.com, where you can see all of our past episodes if you are missing anything. And please, if you haven't already, like this episode and subscribe to it on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening to. That just helps us to be able to reach more people. And if you have any friends or business colleagues that you think will enjoy this, please share it with them as well. So that's it for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that you were able to laugh at the falters that I've had over the last couple weeks, and that my horrible experience here of being behind has sparked a good conversation that I really wanted to have with you guys. So I hope that you enjoyed it, and I am going to run off now so I can send this episode to my poor editor, who is going to hopefully still love me after this. And I want to make sure that I give him as much time as possible to turn this around so it will not be late for you guys tomorrow. So fingers crossed everything works out, and I will talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Greater Than Business podcast at www.greaterthanbusiness.com.